Unlike other presenters who are, providing papers or working on papers, this is not from the paper. This is what would be called first impressions, undigested thoughts, and perhaps ideas that were, battered around by the bar. So I'm just throwing them out here about sort of things that we want to think about a little bit about Denmark. I just came back from Denmark a week ago. We were there for a couple of weeks. We were in Western Europe, in Switzerland. We were in France. We were in England. I was there with my partner, who's also doing research on environmental movements and oil and gas bans, what that actually means, but how those are moving forward. I'm looking at the labor side. And of course, the reason we want to look at the labor side, of course, is that we continue to hear all the bad news. If you didn't happen to see the Guardian this morning, there was more bad news on the Guardian, and the Guardian regularly brings us bad news, and it's getting worse all the time. World's close to irreversible climate breakdown. We're looking at 2.5 at a minimum by 2050. It could be 2.9 by 2050, and you're looking at 5 degrees or more by the end of the century. All this, right, makes you depressed and makes you want to think that you want to go somewhere nice. And I'm thinking, Jesus, Denmark is the place you want to be. Right? If there's a place where you want to go during the climate crisis, where they got great coffee, they got great baked goods, they have a temperate climate, they have some of the best beer, some of the best sausages, there's no poverty, you can bike and walk to work right throughout the entire summer, there's beautiful architecture. And if I had to, have a place where I was going to hide out during that climate crisis, there's the Royal National Library called the Black Diamond. It's the most beautiful public building I've ever seen in my goddamn life. Okay, this is the place that you want to hide out during the climate crisis. Okay, Denmark, right, as we all probably have heard, this great image, right? Okay, but it is one of the climate leaders. It's not only a beautiful place, it's one of the first movers on climate policy. The Social Democratic government of Frederiksen has come in and said, we need to take action, right? And they have actually done action, okay? They have signed major energy and industry agreements saying that they want to have 100% green electricity by 2030, that they actually do want to have a plan to get to net zero by 2050. They want a 70% reduction in their emissions by 2030. And to top it off, they've said, look, we're going to do this on an international stage. We're going to get other countries to join us. Who else is going to join us? We're going to create something called the Beyond Oil and Gas Alliance. And that we want to say that we want countries to commit to say that they are going to phase out all extraction and all use of oil and gas by 2050. If you're an environmental activist, you go, oh my God, someone's actually doing something. Someone's actually trying to take some initiatives. God damn it, it's a government that's actually saying we're going to do it. Holy smokes. Well, how is this happening, right? Well, unsurprisingly, yes, there is some very good news on the environmental front. And there's good news on the climate policy as well. They have some of the most amazing windmills I've ever seen, right? And they have the world leader, or one of the world leaders in windmill production. It's called Vestas. You go to their plants, you go to the export port, Esbjerg, and you are blown away, and you almost want to weep in tears to say, Jesus, there is the technology, we can do this. You can put these things on ships, you can drop them in the damn ocean, and you can get clean energy just like that. And you go, Jesus, maybe they are on something. They have environmental and climate councils. They have them coming out to Wazoo. Okay, they got them in every ministry. They got them between each of the labor groups. This looks great. They have municipalities involved in the circular economy. Who would have known, right? They're actually talking about a circular economy by municipal and mayor officials. We talked to the guy in Esbjerg. Oh, yes, we are very concerned about this. We are moving. And you go, I want to kiss you, okay? This is right. This is the kind of response that you want to have. They have new measures, and this is one of the biggest things they've developed is district heating, right? Rather than have every individual large apartment block and commercial building all having their own power units and heating and cooling units, they got it so that's now set up on a district model so that they are using recycled water, or they're recycling different kinds of heat and their energy systems throughout major areas of their cities. And of course, they've also talked about not only you have biking and you have walking, but you also have a major expansion of trains and transit systems and the electrification of transit. You go and talk to their business officials at the Dansk Industry, and they will show you these wonderful graphs that they have reached sustainable growth, they call it. We now have it. We have growth. At the same time, our emissions are continuing to plummet. This graph looks marvelous. Yes, there's actually some truth to it. I need you to hang on to that moment because they are showing you this. But you got to just take it with a bit of a grain of salt here and use that coffee to keep your eyes wide open. Similarly, I think this graph actually is a bit better. It actually shows that they are slowly moving off of oil, not moving off natural gas, but they have actually converted coal plants onto what they call biomass. Biomass sounds great. Man, it's biomass. It has to be good. Okay. This sounds great. Okay. So you're moving to biomass. And yes, their big former oil and gas company, unfortunately called something called, the acronym in English is called DONG. That's the Danish National Oil and Gas Company, right? Okay. They renamed themselves as they realized their acronym was terrible to Ørsted, and they're a utility company now. But they are expanding renewable energy, and you've seen this expansion of renewable offshore and onshore wind. Okay. Denmark, we know, is able to do this now through what they still call the social model, and everybody talks about the social model. And God damn it, yes, it's great. 60%, 64% of people are covered by our union members. 80% collective agreement coverage. Generally have consultation, whether it's right or left, talking about if you're going to do some big agreement, there's going to be public support for it. Government's going to kick in cash for education. Yes, unions can continue to have a say on education. Yes, they can continue to have their own unemployment funds. Yes, they can have their big pension funds. And yes, they can make sure that when people have to move out of particular industries, they're going to get the kind of vocational training they have. And unions are going to have a say in that. And you go to every major private sector union there, and they will tell you about, this is all about training. Any just transition that we're doing is about training. Every number that we're looking at talks about skills. We need more training. We need more people, and we have the ability to do it. And you go, Jesus, yes, you do, because you spend more than any other government in the damn world, right, as a percentage of GDP. If Canada was to spend the same amount proportionally that Denmark has, we would have an extra $40 billion being spent on vocational training and on colleges, and it would essentially be free and public for every person in Canada. And you go, oh my God, right? Okay, maybe they do have something. Maybe we just need to get to a vocational type training program. What I was surprised is that we're still in this sort of ad hoc moment of the labor movement engaging in climate. They say, look, we have flexicurity, we have the Danish social model, we have trust, we have partnership. We're still sort of thinking about how we need to sort of transition. We've always had transition here in Denmark. Our shipping industry went down and we still move forward, right? Okay, we had training, we moved workers into new areas of manufacturing. We have begun to wind down our oil industry. We have then moved those workers into offshore wind and onshore wind and the development of them, right? So we don't necessarily have to think about, because we have some of those key institutional pillars already, right? And it's interesting. Nonetheless, unions are beginning to sort of certainly engage with climate issues. They are certainly been very interested in working with Ørsted as well as with others, right, in terms of trying to ramp up that windmill manufacture and installation and the creation of port facilities for it. Unions like 3F has been lobbying directly the government to expand vocational training, although sadly it usually means that they are happy to mean that it might mean that a reduction of funding elsewhere in the post-secondary system. They think that this is a fair trade-off. I'm not so sure, but that's how they're thinking about it. Unions have joined now over the past few years what are called climate partnership councils for each major sector. I think there was like 14, and unions are involved in each of those major sectors, and they're actually developing plans. Talked about a circular economy. I should show you the climate construction model that's being developed in Denmark. It's 108 pages, and they are thinking about everything, right? It's amazing to see, and it's a great, okay, so they're actually moving forward. Less optimistic or perhaps less inspiring was the fact that you talked to Dansk Metal, which is their major manufacturing, and their big initiative is to have a carbon capture alliance where they're working with offshore oil multinationals. Think about how they're going to run pipelines and try to capture some of the CCS gas that's going back and forth, and they're going to use it for extra recovery, right? Okay. Union support. But anyways, the whole point is that unions don't necessarily have a climate policy yet, but interestingly enough, on Monday and Tuesday, this upcoming Monday and Tuesday, The FH, which is their National Labor Confederation, is about to have a major convention, and they're going to talk about a major climate policy of which all the unions will be voting. So that's a really big step forward. Always great to hear too, in each of these sort of situations, whether you're talking to business, whether you're talking to labor, everyone's talking about partnership, everyone's talking about trust. Everyone is talking about offshore wind is their export industry, their leading new industry. It's going to be jobs. Everyone's talking about renewables as energy security, and it's good for everyone. It's going to be cheaper. Like there's this sort of general sense that they are right, okay, that they have taken these kinds of key ideas that people are thinking about or dreaming about, and suddenly that they are sort of part of the sort of public or institutional or organized interest discussions, right? And that they are actually sort of moving in this. Business always talks about how green business is good for business. I can't imagine going to any business association meeting and talking about how green business in Canada is good for business, okay? Green business is not going to be any sort of that you're going to make money here, right? Okay, so all this stuff is very good. But maybe it's just me being Canadian and being cynical, okay? Maybe it's just me being an old-time lefty and an old-time construction worker. But I sort of think that there might be a bit more bad news. And certainly there's a reason why this is the Dansk Industry, the DI building in downtown Copenhagen, which is just a hop, skip, and a jump from Parliament. And right, it's a beautiful, massive building, right? Okay. And all of the major multinationals in Copenhagen have brand new spanking buildings. And so here you can see the power of business. And it may not be necessarily a new social model that we need to think about, but what actually third way social democracy means about in Denmark. And the old way, of course, was building up a social democratic party, having that labor movement build that party, right? Having that party in power, having that party put forward principles, having that party making sure it was never, right, okay, going to accept that the rich were your friends, but you had to actually force them to the table and bargaining table, and you were going to wring stuff out of them. And that was the only way, if you had your own government, that you were going to win the good laws and the labor laws, that you were going to win the healthcare, that you were going to win public education, and that you were going to actually see the fruits of your labor being delivered. And they were pretty successful in that kind of old style model from 1924 to 1988. I think Denmark was the second elected social democratic government in Western Europe, and had probably one of the longest runs along with Sweden, right? And to see that, right, the creation of a very different kind of society, a very different kind of democracy, a very different kind of labor movement. That's not what the unions and the social democrats are doing now. Now it's about international champions. Now it's about fostering business profitability. Now it's about pushing forward the biggest kinds of multinational corporations that Denmark has. And that's for oil and gas, that's Ørsted. That's for shipping, Maersk, which is the #1 shipping company in the world. That's for pharmaceuticals. That's for agri-food, where Danes are amongst the leading European companies. And of course, as my son always points out on a daily basis, Lego, which is the #1 toy manufacturer in the entire world. Okay, so we were talking about it. All for the last 30 years have seen their profits soar. All have seen their profit share go up. All have seen major returns to capital. All have seen a significant increase in terms of income share going to the top 10%. And any business representative at DI will tell you they have a very good working relationship with government. And the reason they have a good working relationship with government is because they're on every damn committee that there actually is, okay? They are there in the room shaping policy right alongside government officials. And this means from everything from policies, taxes to regulation. And they are very clear when you sort of push a little bit to say, what does this mean for a carbon tax? Or what does this mean for transitioning your industry? Oh, we have to think very seriously. All of that would lead to leakage. Okay, well, that's kind of a wrong word for us English folks, English-speaking folks. Leakage thing, it's kind of sound like it's not necessarily the way we. But what they mean, of course, is that they will take their business and their investments and go elsewhere. That's what they mean. We would have leakage if you begin to tax us, or if you begin to make us do something else. Okay. Similarly, it's open for business. I don't want to get into it, but Denmark's a tax haven. It's one of the lowest tax jurisdictions in the world. It's one of the most financialized countries in Western Europe. It is now a financial hub. Any kind of climate policy, any kind of climate development has to run through finance now and get a stamp of approval. But if it's making profits elsewhere, it doesn't have to necessarily give that stamp of approval too quick. And And it certainly doesn't have to give the stamp of approval to the oil and gas industry. Because yes, even though now permits are canceled, all the other ones that were formerly let, all the exploration permits, all the former development licenses are all still green lit, okay? And what it actually means is that oil and gas is going to be expanding now over the next 2 decades plus, okay? And that the emissions just from offshore, right, are going to blow Denmark's carbon budget through the roof. Guess what? Those are offshore emissions. They don't count, okay? They don't count, okay? Denmark's energy mix also looks lovely, also looks beautiful. They got 40% renewable energy. All of it is now entirely privatized. 38 suppliers, multiple retailers, electricity sold on an hourly price. They are raking it in now, okay? Right, okay, they are getting it for oil and gas, they're getting it for renewables. Biomass, it turns out to be wood chips. All the wood chips are coming from Baltic states, Russia. Guess who else ships them? Canada. Can you believe it? Denmark is importing wood chips from British Columbia to run some of its former coal and natural gas plants, okay? But this gets better. They don't count the emissions from biomass. Guess why? Because they're from trees. It's apparently net zero. I like that one, okay? Now that was a bit of greenwashing that I hadn't seen, okay? The state of green, oh, sorry, I know I'm overboard, but some of this is too good, okay? We have the Crown Prince of Denmark, Prince Frederick here, right, okay? He is the spokesperson for what's called the state of green, which is the establishment of multiple public-private partnerships across the electricity industry, across windmills, across any of the building efficiencies and building materials. And it's all about how it's good for business. And the Crown Prince is there to tell you why it's good for everyone, right? Okay, and he looks good, right? He's a prince. Jesus, that has to be good, okay? What could be any better to have him here? The reality is that, like Canada, Denmark is going to say it might meet its climate targets. It ain't going to meet its climate targets, okay? Or it's going to simply greenwash those climate targets away, right? Whether it's through biomass or whether it's through its offshore. It doesn't have a plan for transitioning its transit sector, especially in terms of cars and EVs. It has no plans at all to transition its shipping sector. Maersk is the largest one. They're talking about hydrogen. They're talking about carbon capture. None of that's really real. Agriculture still is a special sector, both in Europe and especially in Denmark. It gets a complete pass from any kinds of emission kind of policies. North Sea Energy Island, which was just announced, sadly, there's a little problem. They don't know how to get the energy, the electricity from the island to Denmark or to the mainland, because it's so far and you have to transition it into direct current. It's a big problem. And since I'm from Newfoundland, I can tell you it's a multi-billion-dollar problem, okay, about trying to do something like this. The Danish Council on Climate Change has just last month said, the government's climate initiatives and measures do not demonstrate the likelihood that the Climate Act's 70% target for 2030 will be met. It remains unclear how the government intends to meet the remaining approximately 2/3 of the required reductions. Isn't that nice? Consequently, they conclude, new initiatives are needed. Okay. Should Labour be a leader? Yes, Labour should be a leader. Is Danish Labour taking more initiative? Yes, it's taking more initiative, and it's got the resources to it. This is why it is engaged in these climate committees. Yes, it's finally hiring people for research and staffing. Yes, it's finally engaged in these partnership councils, and yes, it's doing the number crunching on skill projections, employment, etc. to say these are the kinds of numbers that we might need, and we can begin to actually see that they might have some real impact down the road. Lessons. Well, despite what we might think about Denmark, and I think since it's nice to share these cases, whether it's Australia, whether it's Colorado, think about, okay, what's happening, what's working, what's not. Well, I think despite government commitments and despite a lot of policy wash, I think it's pretty clear that that sort of third way model, right, may not be necessarily working for the climate, and it may have real dire consequences for the workforce in the long term. It's also pretty clear about where Labour is at right now, is that maybe it also is not working, or it's not working fast enough, right? Okay, about trying to make a sort of a real difference. Yes, it has something that all Labour movements should go out and do anything they can go and get and grab. You need your own damn unemployment insurance funds. You need your own damn pensions funds. You need to be on those boards of vocational training, and you need to have those employers say they are going to put in some serious cash. None of those demands are anywhere I know elsewhere, right? But they sure as shit, I think they should be, right? If you want a just transition and you want to say that you want to have people trained and you want to have some say in that, you got to have some tools to make that happen. If you don't have those tools, you can have social dialogue until, well, fires come home, and you're not going to get anything that you actually want. You're just going to get a lot of talk. Does labor need to lead? And yes, doesn't matter whether it's in Denmark, whether it's in Australia. I think as Marcus and Peter have brilliantly pointed out, doesn't matter whether it's in Colorado, don't have the resources. But I think it's pretty clear that we ain't getting out of this climate crisis until labor can step up, and labor needs to step up. And we've got to get the resources and the knowledge and bring back some of that old style social democracy about it for us, that we need a sustainable planet.